Hi, I'm Ivan Oransky. I'm the Vice President and Global Editorial Director of MedPage Today here in New York. In this third part of a three-part series in which I talked to Christie, the U.S. country head and president of Novartis Pharmaceutical Corporation, we discuss a drug that a lot of cardiologists are very excited about that has, of course, just come on the market, Entresto. We talk about what exactly Novartis is doing in a very interesting model, and some say an innovative model, to get it on the market and to get it into the hands of as many doctors and patients as possible. We also talk about what changing demographics, what effects those challenges will have and those changes will have on Novartis and other pharmaceutical companies. And finally, what does this all mean for the future of Novartis? What does it mean for the future of the pharmaceutical industry? Tell me sort of about, right now and maybe in terms of whether it's your own story. I hear it a lot. Obviously there's some oncology issues, cancer. Also heard about heart failure. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, maybe we could talk about Entresto for a second. Sure. Our audience was, our readers are very excited about Entresto when it came out, when when all of the results came out, of course. And we actually heard cardiologists talking in ways that you don't typically hear cardiologists talking. So we knew we were onto something, and cardiology is something we do a lot with, of course. Yeah. Tell us how that's going. You and the leadership here have taken a pretty unusual step. I mean, there are a few other cases of it, but tell us a little bit about the the value-based pricing, the outcomes-based pricing that you're trying, and how is that going?
Sure. So we were obviously as well excited about Entresto because a 20% reduction in mortality. These patients can live longer. We also see a reduction of the same amount in hospitalization, so longer and better quality being out of the hospital. And so the expectations were big from everyone about the hopes of Entresto. In fact, when we also looked at the pricing of Entresto, we looked at patient access because we knew most of the population would be Medicare. How much will they have to pay out of pocket based on what we priced the product at? And so we took instead of what is the most we can get out of this product, what is the most number of patients that could access this product? And so that's how we priced Entresto. We came to market, and unfortunately there is a 6-month window where payers are allowed to NDC block new therapies. And so unfortunately, when physicians tried to prescribe, they found that there's massive paperwork, prior auths. One physician was telling me how many times he had to write a prior auth or an exception, and then even had to get on the phone with the medical people, which they don't have time to do that. When they see a patient every 7 to 11 minutes, your audience knows this, there's not a lot of time when a heart failure patient comes into your office. A lot of them are on 20 different medications. They have multiple chronic illnesses, and if they say they're doing fine, to try to start a new conversation about a new therapy is also an issue. So you take the market access, I can't write it, it's a cumbersome, start a new conversation with somebody who I think is stable. How do I do that? So it's some of the challenges that we're facing.
You talked a bit about some of the hurdles to prescribing, whether it's new drugs, whether it's drugs that are on the more expensive end of the spectrum. What effect do you think some of the negotiations that are happening in terms of Part D, Medicare Part D, might have on Novartis, might have on your pipeline or on anything that's coming to market? Or how are you thinking about that?
So in terms of Medicare Part D, I think one of the things that's missed is that those prices are already negotiated. They're negotiated up to 30% rebates, more rebates than you see in the commercial side. That's already happening. I don't think people are aware of that. But in general, when you look at cost, looking only at drug costs, I think negates the total picture of healthcare. If you look right now, drugs have been 10% of the total healthcare costs for the last 20 years. It's expected they'll be 10% in the next 10 years. It's also been shown by the U.S. government, actually, the CBO, the Budget Office, that both Medicare and Medicaid when you spend money on drugs, you actually save money in other parts of the healthcare system. So what Novartis is trying to do and be a leader of is partner with the government. CMS's goal in 2018 is that 50% of their payments will be value-based. And they're starting to look at drugs. And heart failure right now is costing the U.S. $30 billion a year. And if we can actually partner with the government, with the payers, with patient advocacy, the patients themselves and us, and say, listen, here's a drug that reduces hospitalization, reduces mortality, and reduces costs in other parts of the healthcare system. Let's look at it as a whole, not just the piece of the drug. Are we actually reducing the cost of healthcare by adding this product? And we're doing that also outside of Medicare and the government. We have been talking with payers since we launched on outcomes-based contracting, and we have a couple in the works that we expect to sign by the end of the year. People are very interested in trying to put the pharmaceutical costs with the medical costs and combining those in one to say what really are the levers that add value and that subtract value from the system, and making sure that we overall can reduce healthcare costs while we continue to innovate.
Is that a push you're going to continue to make in
Yes.
terms of outcomes-based pricing?
Absolutely, because I think if you limit the pricing of pharmaceuticals, you may limit innovation, and that wouldn't be good for patients who, some patients have been cured of their cancer or turned it into a chronic illness, I should say. Patients living with Alzheimer's or future diseases that we're really looking at may suffer if we don't look at the total system costs. And if the total system cost says we're charging too much for our drugs, then we shouldn't charge that much. If the total system cost says you're saving, then that it warrants what it's being priced at. In fact, you mentioned Entresto. Entresto actually has been shown to be cost effective by outside objective opinions. And we're more than willing to come to the table and give rebates that are significantly more than what they're asking us to do, just to make sure patients can access their medicines.
You mentioned that you have these two sort of large populations that are both growing, and they're growing in different ways, and the millennials, of course, and then the baby boomers and there is a relationship between those two. In fact, often it's a very close relationship between those two. How does that, specifically sort of drive how you look at the business? You're a large company, obviously. You mentioned 23,000 and change people. You have to have lots of irons in the fire at any given point. How does that help you think about innovation, that you have these two very disparate groups that are both obviously going to be large markets for you?
So when we look at the groups as a whole, one of the things that we focus on is what is the disease and who's most affected by it. So if we look at heart failure, and we say, it typically affects an older population. Where do they find their information? How do we reach them? What best way can we help them? And typically we find, because of the disease and maybe because of their age, they do watch a lot of TV. So that may be a more traditional route with a cardiologist as well, a more traditional approach of how we sell and market to patients. But then you look at a disease that affects more younger patients, like multiple sclerosis, and you say they're not watching TV. They are a totally different approach, which is they're on social media, digital, they're in chat rooms, etc. So what we've done there, and I'm very proud to say the team has won a few awards, actually the best pharmaceutical company, best in class by Digital Health. We started two-way communication with the bloggers to be able to make sure that the bloggers who people are talking to are the most educated, that they have the right information, that they can ask us questions. We have a good relationship with them ongoing so that we can reach people, because also multiple sclerosis patients really take their health into their own hands. Where the older generation tends to listen to their doctor or their caregiver, multiple sclerosis patients want us to be there when they want us there. They want it to be convenient, and they want it to be customized to themselves. And so we see that dichotomy of our approaches, and we really do it by disease state. The third thing that we're doing in terms of patient centricity is moving from, everybody talks about patient-centric, to really moving to patient inclusiveness. So how do we really talk to patients when we design our protocols for our studies? Because now that when we get to the end of our studies, we need to make sure that we have outcomes that actually matter to patients, that we can measure quality of life and what's important to them, versus just it being a study to prove that the drug is effective. We really need a lot more than that when we come to market now in terms of outcomes. And patients have a lot to do with that journey all along the way. So we're trying to take a more inclusive approach to patients versus just a, clinical trial design of a pharmaceutical company with healthcare practitioners, we also now need to make sure that they're included.
So that sort of speaks to, a broad question I'm wondering about. What is the future of a company like Novartis?
Mm-hmm.
You have, again, you're a large company. You have, lots of irons in the fire.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing lots of things. Sounds like you're launching a number of new drugs in the coming years. What's the future?
Mm-hmm.
What does Novartis look like in 2020 and 2025?
Mm-hmm. I think what you saw in 2015 was the rollout of our strategy that was discussed at the board in the summer of 2014 that will continue on. And that is, we want to be number one or number two in every area that we work in. And that is number one or number two, helping more people than we could doing other things. So you saw us divest the consumer business, the animal health business, the vaccines and diagnostics, and really take our resources and put them where we can do the most good. And so what we have now is we have the branded pharmaceutical business, we have the number one eye care business, but we also believe, unlike many of our competitors, Novartis is unique in that we also have Sandoz, our generic company. We believe in innovation, we believe in patents, but once that patent is over, we also believe in high quality generics and biosimilars. So what you see with Novartis is end to end. We want to be that company where patients and healthcare practitioners can trust us to be able to deliver what they need beyond just the medicines, but in terms of solutions to healthcare. And we also, by 10, 20 years from now, need to evolve to the expectations of the millennials, which is not about just treating the illness, but really helping them on a day-to-day basis with their health and wellness, not just when they get sick.